Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, back with a video for you guys. Sorry I didn't get this up last night, guys. Um, this is book two, well, the beginning of book two, I should say, chapter one. I won't mess up my words. I'll try not to. Um, book two, chapter one for To Be Night and Beguile, written by John Philip Betancourt. Let It All Be Done is the opening chapter. So here we go. A ship's foghorn echoed in the air above, just beyond the horizon, when the surface of the sea was a thin line of blue water that met the white light of the sky. A new fresh wind from the east roared into Frenchman Bay, cooling the seagulls as they circled the small, busy harbor of Welshport village. It was the first warm day of spring after a tumultuous few weeks of final winter rainstorms, and with the with the seemingly clearing skies came an ocean liner straight from Liverpool. The ship named Clydesdale began its slow, easy dock into port. The large two chimneys puffed out cottony plumes of white smoke that filled the surrounding air as curious villagers eager to see who was getting off at their small port crowded the small rocky landing. Four people, heavy with suitcases and exhausted travel expressions on their faces, slowly made their way out of the Clydesdale's matty black hall door with its white tarnished rim. They scurried down an iron plank to the landing, where they were met with the happy faces of welcoming Welshportians. Three of the four passengers to exit were from a family of Welshport returning to the island after a long visit to England. The fourth was a young man with sandy brown hair and green eyes that matches the rolling hills deep inside Terramore Forest. He had never been to the island. He had known of it, of course, from the stories of his family and close friends would tell over long fireside chats on Welshport myths and legends, but the island's reality was a complete mystery, as was the reason for his young English this young Englishman's visit. His suitcase was a large brown trunk that had wheels on it conveniently fastened to the bottom for easy traveling. He had no idea how to get to where he was going. All he had was a slip of paper with instructions that had to be followed to the letter if he were to complete his task. At port, as a light sea breeze lifted the young man's soft brown hair, he began to make his way down the small landing and onto the main street, where people were busily shopping and chatting in small cafes, as with many small town people who knew everyone there. Reactions of gossipy giggles soon changed to whispers and hushed questions. As the new stranger made his way through the village, he noticed too, chatting stopped as he passed. Whispers replaced the sound of happy conversation. Automobiles in the street zoomed past, even seemed to slow down as the stranger crossed their eyes' view. Who was he? Where was he going? And who was he looking for? As he continued on his way, he stopped by the smoky and loud town pub. The siren's call, where local sailors came in and drank their long, lonely days at away one cold beer at a time. What can I do, you far sir? The young man turned, looked around at the bar, and everyone was staring at him. He felt as if he was in some alien world, or perhaps he was the alien to them. As he gazed all around at the wooden figures of mermaids and ocean creatures carved into the walls, he opened his mouth to say, "Directions, actually, I'm looking for directions." After the very request, the rest of the patrons went on with their drinking, and the bartender smirked and brought the new traveler a brandy on the house. "Stranger," the bartender quipped, The young man smirked and took a sip of the brown liquor. Directions, you say? Where to? The local inn? Actually, no. Terramore or Terramore? I'm looking for my sister. She lives there with her in-laws. Terramore, the bartender asked with a frozen expression. Right, that's it. My sister Evie lives there. I'm looking for her. Evie Lord is your sister? The bartender asked. Yes, that's right. Do you know her? The young man asked. No, sir. I can't say that I do, but you won't find Mrs. Lord at Terramore now. Not at all, the bartender said cryptically as he wiped spots off of a crystal tumbler. I don't understand. Why won't I find her there? Evie's brother wondered. Mr. Jordan Nichols, Mr. Nicholas Jordan. Mr. Jordan, I think you should ask the Lord just what happened to Miss Eve, Lord. I won't say a word, the bartender said as he turned his back to tend the bar. Nicholas felt the brandy seep into his body, warm and heavy. He was confused and unsure of what in the world the bartender was talking about, but it made him nervous. Evie's mother and father had sent Nicholas to Washport 2 weeks ago when they couldn't get a straight word out of Rebecca about where she was. No letters were answered, no telegrams were returned. Nicholas was on a reconnaissance mission from England to find his sister and see if she was okay. But now was only a wish. But by the behavior of the bartender, Nicholas thought the worst. Was Evie even alive? I can take you up there, young man, so you can see all that you're dealing with, a man said from behind. Nicholas turned and saw an older gentleman with a white beard. His dark blue net sweater smelled of fish and sea salt. His face was handsome, yet withered with aging from the decades on the sea. He knew the lords front to back. He knew them well, just as everyone else in town knew them. He even knew the story of the terrors that occurred not too long ago of the young woman from England who married into the family and became a young widow and soon went mad with grief. Do you know Evie? Nicholas asked. Not personally, no one really got a chance to get to know her here in the village, but the family will have more to say about that. Truth is, son, I don't feel it's my place to tell you what happened, said the young woman, your sister. The family should tell you to your face. What do you mean? Please tell me she is okay. Did something happen to her? Nicholas asked, his green eyes welling up with tears. She's alive, son, alive, but the rest of it, well, that you'll have to come that'll have to come from them. Come on, I'll take you up to Terramore. Nicholas took a deep breath and shook his head as if to remove all the dark thoughts in his mind. He quickly searched his vest for some money to give the bartender for the drink, but the bartender put out his hand and refused. I said this one was on the house, and for what you're about to head into, son, I wouldn't feel right taking your money, the bartender replied to Nicholas, who felt even more worried. In a luxurious furnished second-story drawing room, with 6 large French doors, windows draped in thick yellow curtains, embroidered a golden French floor, Dillis patron at Terramore House, Rebecca Lord stared out of the glass of a window as if she were a framed painting of herself. She was sadly looking over a large garden with several workers building a small gazebo. As her son Jacob supervised from the glass, Jacob's cigarette smoke floated up from his lips as it burned in a red glow while his mother Rebecca continued to watch from the French doors. She nervously wrinkled a lace handkerchief in her pale, bony hands and only snapped out of her fog-like trance as she watched the workers in the garden when her personal maid, Georgina Kent, brought in the afternoon tea. Ma'am, Georgina said as she curtsied. Thank you, Georgie, Rebecca said as she turned from the window, allowing more light to seep into the room. It'll be like he wasn't even here, she added as Georgina replaced Rebecca at the window. Georgina slowly moved over the yellow drapes and looked down at Jacob in the smoke of his cigarette, still watching the workers building the new gazebo. The maid knew what Rebecca was talking about, or better, who. She was talking about her former spiritual guide, Gaspard de Pose. So he is really buried under all that, then? Georgina asked. Rebecca didn't look up from the silver tea kettles as if slowly gurgled out of the hot liquid into a perfect white porcelain cup with swirls of blue pendant waves on the side. It's ghastly, but we had no choice. After everything we've been through, Sabrina, David, Sebastian, having news of Gaspar found murdered in the house would certainly destroy what's left of our family's reputation. I just hope Rebecca paused after revealing the final resting place of Gaspar in her garden under the new gazebo, as if speaking out loud might make it more real than it really was. What is it, man? What were you going to say? Georgina asked, moving over to where Rebecca was with tea. Georgie, do you believe in the spirit world? Rebecca asked, still holding the smoldering cup of tea unsipped from. I believe we all go somewhere. Then we die. Yes, ma'am. Is that what you mean? The maid replied. Spirits don't always go somewhere, Georgie. Not when they're taken the way Gaspar was. Jacob's ideas, well, they're not exactly what I would consider thoughtful of having him buried there. At Terramore unsettles me, Rebecca revealed. The way he died, too, was so brutal. I've never seen wounds like that before, and my family went to war. I've heard of missing limbs and blasts go the, the head all of the sort. But what I saw in Gaspar that night, Jacob asked me to move his body, was something wicked. What could have done that? Georgina wondered. I can't begin to imagine. Perhaps Gaspar intercepted some sort of intruder, a robber. It had just been announced Evie was now a widow. Perhaps someone came to kidnap her for ransom, and Gaspar, maybe he. I don't know. I just don't know what to say, Rebecca replied, trying to make sense of Gaspar's wounds when she too saw them for the first time almost 2 months ago. It was Georgina who found Gaspar, his throat ripped open, his body mangled and drained of blood, the red pool around him, blood and hardened and stained, the marble in a strange way. Georgina's heart felt like it stopped. Evie had just been taken away to Wincliffe Sanitarium, and as Georgina screamed at the top of her lungs, Jacob and Rebecca came running into the house from watching Evie being carted off to see Georgina on her knees trying to lap up the blood from the floor with the bottom of her skirt in a complete breakdown of tears. What the hell is this? Jacob screamed at the sight of his con artist partner dead on the floor. Sir, I found him like this, I swear. My life, on my life, sir, Georgina screamed back, her heart pounding, her hands stained with blood. Rebecca covered Charlotte's eyes as she too turned pale and queasy at the sight of the brutalized Gaspar. Mother, take Charlotte upstairs. Georgina and I will take care of this, whatever this is, Jacob shouted back. Rebecca complied and rushed up to the back staircase, her mind racing in confusion. Charlotte, silent with fear, it was no use covering the little girl's eyes. She saw too much. She always saw too much. Georgina, damn it. Stop crying and help me. We have to move him. Let's take him to the shed. There is a cement through there we can place him in. We'll think of what to do with him after that. We have to get him out of here. Do you understand me? Help me, Jacob ordered. That was 3 months ago, after removing Gaspar's partially decayed body from the cement horse through They decided to bury him in the garden and raise up a gazebo over his grave to mask it. Jacob's voice ordering Georgina around to move a dead body echoed in her mind. Every day since that night they found him dead. Rebecca, too, could still see it when she closed her eyes to sleep. It was such a gruesome scene that it probably would never leave them, never. I've often thought about telling Constable Evans, Georgina confessed to her mistress. Rebecca finally lifted her eyes from the tea and stared coldly into Georgina's soft brown eyes like a tiger zeroing in on her prey. I've just finished telling you that the very knowledge of Gaspar's murder would bring unparalleled attention to this family that has already seen enough scandal for 1,000 years. And you're telling me you often think about telling Christian Evans, who I might add has yet to catch the murderous Mary God. I wouldn't. I mean, I only thought of it because suppose Gaspar had a family, Georgina replied innocently. The only family, Georgie, you should be concerned with is the one that pays you. My family. You will never tell anyone about Gaspar's whereabouts. For all you know, I fired him, or he left, or he's gone. He left Terramore. That's all anyone needs to know. Rebecca dictated as she finally sipped her afternoon tea. Yes, ma'am. Of course, ma'am, Georgina replied as she curtsied to Rebecca. Georgina excused herself and left Rebecca alone in the room. The matriarch of the family stared into the dark corner of the drawing room as the afternoon light slowly sank into dusk. She went over and over in her mind what on earth could have done that to her old friend, a man she saw as spiritual and otherworldly. To die in such a manner was unthinkable. She could only guess something from the darkness came and took him. The shadows came and stated their claim on his soul. Paycheck for all the times he's flipped a tarot card, all the seances, all the magic potions and tonics he made for Rebecca over the years of his employment. Rebecca knew that playing in shadows as she did could potentially bring on a dark karma, but it was risk she was willing to take to keep herself in the world she desperately wanted to be a part of. But on the other hand, Rebecca Lord was no fool. The spirit world may be powerful, but the world of the living was tangible, real, and much more bloodthirsty. In the world of the living, she could control the narrative of every aspect of her life, something she craved just as much as knowing her fate from the spiritual world. The Lord family matriarch stood up from her olive green sofa and walked back to the drawing room window. Now, bathed in gold light of the approaching dusk, she looked down at the man fishing up the day's work on the new gazebo above Gaspar's hastily made grave, and saw her son Jacob standing in the dark, in his dark suit still smoking. Damn you if you had anything to do with this, Jacob, Rebecca said to herself out loud as your Charlotte listened at the open door. Young Charlotte. Hearing this, Charlotte rushed over and down the hall, her white dress brushing up against the dark mahogany tables of the hallways and oak corridor. Oh, okay, dark corridor. She ran into the room and tilted the overall, hallways and a corridor, chairs with red velvet upholstery. She ran into her room and tilted the oval standing mirror so that her whole body was in the reflection, and suddenly the face of her Aunt Sabrina appeared to her. You must not fail this time. Jacob must pay for what he did to Sebastian. It's Jacob's fault Sebastian had to become what he is. And for that, Gaspar is dead, and many others will die too, Sabrina warned. What do I do? Charlotte asked. Sabrina signaled to Charlotte to come close to the mirror and listen. Charlotte put her ear with the small pearl earring up against the glass, and Sabrina whispered her plan into her host's ear. That's the only way, Sabrina said. Charlotte nodded in agreement, and Sabrina's reflections vanished. In a quaint flat above a flower shop in the center of town, the blue sky above Washport was slowly turning purple, and cooling dusk, the light sea breeze lifted the sheer curtains in the window, where Constable Christian Evans was standing sipping a dark brandy from his minibar. He wasn't alone. Christian's best friend, Philippe Braga, was there too, at the table sitting there too at the table in the light of gas lamp drinking the same drink. Both men were a blank expression with a wore a blank expression on their faces as the conversation they were having dipped into the darkness and strangeness they experienced in the last few weeks of their lives. There were so many questions and no answers, especially from Christian's point of view. For his part, Philippe was too afraid to tell Christian what he saw at Eliza's cabin. He knew that if he uttered one word of truth of Sebastian's everlasting life, thanks to Eliza's spell of vampirism, there was no telling what his consequences would be. Christian took a sip of his brandy and turned from the window overlooking a village from his second story to flat to Philip. How can you not remember what you saw on Good Island? You were there for days. I must have been ill, or I don't know. I made my way back as soon as I could, Felipe said, lying to protect the horrible and frightening secret of Sebastian's back from the dead. I just can't figure out what I'm missing here. You were in Eliza's house for days. You didn't see Mary once, and then I'm at Terramore with Evie, and all hell breaks loose, and I'm telling you, Felipe, Christian said, pulling the second chair out to sit. The evil in this town is more than I could ever control, or even stop. Felipe took another sip. It helped with the line. Gaspar, you said he was dead in a pool of blood. Who could have done that to him? Felipe asked, changing the subject. I don't know. It was incredibly bloody. When I finally got myself together, after I met up with you at your house and went back to Terramore, and Rebecca looked at me like I had heads. She said Gaspar went back to the New York City and was headed home to Paris, that she dismissed him. But you saw him with your own eyes, Felipe noted. I did. At least I think I did. I don't know what the hell I saw. I I was rushing, and it was dark, and things were going so fast, and all I could think about is Evie. I still don't know what I saw. I shouldn't have left so quickly, but I can tell you I can't sleep anymore. I haven't slept well or at all in months. It's all I think about. When I do get to sleep, that body comes to my mind, and I see the gaping hole in his neck, and I hear Evie screaming over and over again in my head as they dragged her off, Christian replied. Felipe could see how exhausted his friend, it showing in his face, in his eyes, on his body. He was a strong man, but his body seemed to have withered slightly, still strong but breaking down. There's no way you can get hold of Gaspar, Felipe wondered out loud, trying to change the subject a little. Rebecca and the Lords won't budge on how to get a hold of him. As much as my whole job requires me to do, what I have to do is to protect. I have to just let the Gaspar thing go. Other things have now come to the forefront, and I have to move on them, leave Gaspar and move for an on getting Evie back, but I can't concentrate. I can't focus. I try. I really try, but it's like a nagging bug in my head that won't stop, Christian added. About Evie. We're so briefly together, sort of a rush to romance. You've really fallen in love with her, haven't you? Felipe asked. We connected like no one I have ever been with, and they took her. I can't let her stay in that place. Everything has changed, Philippe. I have to get her back no matter what, no matter how much money the Lords try to use to keep her locked up. I'm going to get Evie back before whatever got to Gaspar gets to her. Felipe felt a chill go down his spine. He knew that Sebastian had been to Terramore that night. His initial was telling Gaspar intention was telling Gaspar wasn't really in Paris and was dead by Sebastian's hand, and somehow the lords were covering for his mysterious murder in their house. Perhaps Felipe thought it was better for them to not ask questions. What was what was worse was that Felipe knew his best friend was in love, and that even if Christian somehow got Evie out of the asylum, Sebastian now stood in their way of love and being together. And what Sebastian did to Gaspar was any indication of his fury and power? Felipe knew they were all in danger. Perhaps you should let it things go, Christian. You have so much to be accountable for as the island's constable that maybe chasing after Evie might be a bad idea. Felipe suggested attempting to save his from Sebastian's potential bitter bite. How could you say that? You know the monster Jacob is. Look at what he did to you. The unsettled Christian said, motioning to Philippe's hand injury from this time as Jacob's page. He can't go around and destroy people's lives because they're inconvenient to him. We have to put a stop to it. And freeing Evie is at the top of the ways of how. Christian further explained as he poured one more brandy into his glass. And Mary, what about fishing Mary out of the hold out and holding her accountable for what she did to Sebastian? Felipe asked. Christian tilted his head. He felt annoyed that Felipe was questioning his ability to do things at the same time, but in reality, the stress of then Vince events and the hot brandy rushing into his veins was finally getting him. You don't think I can do both? You don't think I can do my job? You were at Eliza's cabin for days and days, and you didn't see her once. So you say if she isn't there, and she hasn't been seen in the village, I have to assume she's gone too, Christian said, his mind now spinning from the drink and buzzing with the terrible memories and sleepless nights. You're overworked, friend. I could tell you this has been too much. It couldn't have been easy watching them take Evie away that way. Maybe even I pushed your mind to believe you saw something you didn't. Felipe said, trying to protect Sebastian's murder of Gaspar to keep the vampire safe from exposure for all their sakes. You're supposed to be my friend. You said Mary wasn't where she most likely was, and I believed you. Why don't you believe me? Christian said loudly, in his own words slurred. Christian, maybe you need to lie down. What I need is to get Evie back and find Mary and find Gaspar. What I need, Felipe, is for my best friend to believe me when I say I saw a dead body, when I say that I love Evie, and when I say I can take care of my job and still save her. But you don't. You don't, Christian shouted, his boozy breakdown now in full effect. All right, all right, take a break. Just breathe. Come on, I'll take you to bed. We can talk tomorrow, Felipe said, the guilt now rushing over his heart for gaslighting his closest friend. But he had to. He has to make sure Sebastian was never discovered. The dangers of what the monster would and could do were too high. The last thing Felipe wanted was a clever detective like Christian investigating Gaspar's death. Only to discover the vampire Sebastian. Felipe put a sloppy, stressed, and devastated Christian to bed and waited until he fell asleep. for cleaning up in the front room and blew out the gas lamp. He took his coat and looked back at Christian's small living room and took a deep breath. Sorry, friend. I have to keep you far away from the monster. Far, far away. Felipe said to an empty room now dim with the dark light from an open window when he left. Evie meets Dr. Kim. Evie, I want you to tell me all about it. Tell me every single detail. Your time seeing what you saw, hearing what you heard. A disembodied voice said in the darkness. Evie laying on a sofa and at Wincliffe Sanitarium with her doctor, did not open her eyes or answer the voice. Evie's new room, an asylum she was taken to because of her supposed breakdown and visions of her dead husband Sebastian, was mainland Maine, in a secluded area, was about an hour and a half from the city of Bangor. The white-walled Wincliffe was a three-story facility that sat deep in the thicket of woods since early 1900s, and housed some of the East Coast's most peculiar and disturbed and deranged patients with psychology disorders. Some of those people left and lived happily lives, but others had a red mark X in their file. Lifters unable to live of their own mental state and sanity. The doctor with Evie flipped a page of his notes from Evie's file as he attempted again to get her to talk, revealing a red X, a result of a hearty payment to the doctor from Jacob, made sure of it. The doctor was Andrew Kim, a man in his late 40s with perfect slick back hair that was white at the temples. His smile was toothy and large, and walked around in his small bodily frame, very dapperly dressed at all times. He was a confident mental physician that studied at some of the most prestigious schools in a nation and even spent time in England, working with doctors there and hardened insane criminals, coming home to America, where he became Wincliffe chief of staff. He was not without his faults, however. Behind the intelligent and caring bedside manner, he too had his hands in things that were perhaps science and medicine could not fix, especially with his dealings with the Lord family. It was not waste for him to just take Evie Jordan, Lord in the mental hospital, and Jacob's request. He had to Jacob would make sure every dirty secret in Andrew's life was exposed, hadn't he hadn't taken Evie. Jacob Lord was not a man Dr. Andrew Kim wanted to cross, not again. On the 10th night of Evie's admission into Wincliffe, Evie had a session with Dr. Kim in his office. Their psychotherapy for alleged visions of Sebastian at Terramore were always topic at hand, not to mention her son's shift into a love affair with another man in Sebastian's own room, so soon after his death, a clear sign of insanity, or at least that's what the water Evie to believe. She lay on Dr. Kim's leather sofa in her white hospital gown and thin blue pinstripes that went the length of the dress, her hands clasped perfectly over her stomach, her white fingers fidgeting with the apron pocket she had tied to on. You're nervous. Tell me why, Dr. Kim said, sitting across from Evie in a cloud of cigarette smoke and orange lamplight. I just don't have much to say, Doctor, Evie replied, her eyes glued to a crack in the office ceiling. Let's pick up where we left off on our last session, Kim said, leaving his notes. You mentioned last time you weren't sure if someone was watching you when you lived at Terramore. Tell me about that. It's late. Can I go back to my room? She asked, turning her head slightly to meet his gaze. You agreed you have these sessions with me a few days ago. You need to have them so that we can work out what's bothering you, Evie. Do you think it's normal for a person to feel as though they're being watched? I'm watched here, aren't I? Yes, you are. by the nurses and orderlies, but they watch you and other patients to keep you safe. Why would you think someone at Terramore was watching you? Could you tell me why you felt like that, Kim prodded the doctor? Have you ever felt you couldn't trust someone? Trust anyone? One goes about their life giving and giving and giving, and suddenly a slew of terrible things occur, and it's like a slap in the face by the universe. I can't tell about this anymore. I'm exhausted, Eve replied as she sat up. Are you really tired this late in the evening, or are you trying to get out of this session? Kim asked slyly. Why did you come to Terramore? Why did you let Jacob tell you what to do? Everything I said I saw was true. Someone was playing a horrible trick on me. You tried to make it look as if I was going mad, and Jacob pounced on that. Then you showed up, Evie said. Dr. Kim lifted a brow. Although Evie was telling the truth, Dr. Kim didn't like how she was attempting to flip the conversation to him, and now that she's was agreed to her experience at Terramore. You're stalling, Miss Jordan, the doctor replied in a frustrated tone. Evie's eyes narrowed and she replied, It's Mrs. Lord. Fine, Mrs. Lord, you're stalling. If you don't want to talk things over with me tonight, then I'll have you take your medicine now and we can do this tomorrow. No, please, I don't want to take anything anymore, she replied as she recoiled back into the leather sofa that stretched and screamed with the shift of her weight. I don't have time to deal with your rebellion. You either tell me what you imagined or take the pill and go to sleep. It's really up to you. Those are your choices. Now choose, Kim replied. Evie now felt her blood boil inside of her. She had told him on someone of their first meeting when she arrived, everything had he refused to believe or refused, or was forced to refuse. Her visions of events of Jacob's money and influence. That was the true question. How dare you? Why would I imagine any of that? I told you everything I told you several times. Why does Jacob keep me here? Why do you allow it? Evie shouted as she stood up from the sofa. I told you once, Miss Lord. I'll tell you and tell you again. Jacob Lord has no control over me, and my reasons for allowing you to stay here with us at Wincliffe, he replied, lying about the Jacob connection. I want to go. I'm completely sane. I want to go now, she snapped at Dr. Kim, was lost by his patience with her. This place is to help you. We are here to make you better, but you're resisting. You've been resisting the psychotherapy since you came, and I think that perhaps we will have to change tactics and make you do better, to make you heal. It's the only way. Evie stepped back, slightly unsure what he meant. You can't keep me here. I want to leave. You have to let me leave if I request it. No, no, I don't. You've been deemed a danger to yourself by your family, Miss Lord, and as I attempt to get you to see this for yourself, I cannot in good conscience let you go. Not now, and maybe not ever, Dr. Kim replied as he pulled a small porcelain pill box out of his jacket pocket. What? You can't do that, she added. I absolutely can, and have. You're mine, Dr. Kim replied as he walked over to Evie and grabbed her hand, force Take your medicine, and I'll see you in the morning. Eva looked down at the small white circular pill. She took it twice before. It made her drowsy, and in minutes she would pass out asleep. It frightened her how powerful the pill was. Not only did it make her incredibly groggy the next day, which was why Andrew Kim scheduled night sessions. She hated the pill. She hated not remembering how she got to bed, or who brought her to bed, or how long she was asleep. It made her skin crawl, but she took the pill, drank water, and lifted her tongue to show it was gone. True to form, she passed out asleep. Minutes later, the servant was called and to lift Evie up in her white hospital gown and blue stripes, placed down on a wheelchair. She was taken off to her room and laid down in a twin bed that was packed perfectly centered in the room below a square window. As soon as the door closed, Evie's eyes opened and she pulled the pill out of her mouth. She thought her cut herself to hide it below her tongue toward the back of her mouth. Evie lay in bed, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and frustration, but most of all determination to leave the hospital and fight back against Jacob and his obvious scheme. As the orderly wheeled back Evie's empty wheelchair to the empty rec room, another patient peeked through the window in her door into the small window of Evie's door, where she watched her asleep. She was beautiful, dark haired with warm toned skin, her eyes shining chestnut brown. She whispered to herself, Evangeline. Good Island had become somewhat of a fortress since Eliza's use of her powers to revive Sebastian Lord from his death. Slumber 6 feet underground, the two good women, Eliza and Mary, needed to keep his existence a secret as long as they could, or suffer the consequences of everyone knowing the truth at their powers. Night had fallen, and the waves of the Atlantic crashed up against the jagged shoreline of Good Island. Like black liquid, Mary sat in a rocking chair, telling over a book of spells she borrowed from her mother, studying and thinking of the most amazing things she could do. Now that she had and her mother had aligned together in a two-woman coven, the alliance was more a protection tactic on Eliza's part. She knew that once Sebastian's secret was revealed, that they were the ones with the ungodly ability to raise the dead. Untold horrors were to come. Strength in numbers, two sorcerers is better than one. As Mary studied her mother's, Eliza stirred in a large pot of dark liquid, warming it in a hot stove above the fire. Her long, whitened, red hair messily braided down her back to her hip. You'll learn better if you eat, Eliza said as she stirred, but did not look up. Wait, what? Okay, I lost my. Did not look up from her pot. Mary closed the book and smiled. It has been ages since she felt the comforts of home. Living in Welshport in her own town flat felt like independence, but she truly did miss her mother. The horrors of the last few months proved that despite it all, she was meant to be there on Good Island with her mother. She walked over to the warm stove, but the liquid in the pot did not look appetizing. Maybe I'll have some later, Mary said, cringing. This isn't for you, girl. This is for your cousin, Sebastian. It's night now. He'll wake up. Need substance, Eliza explained. You mean it's more? Mary paused. Blood, Eliza confirmed. My God, Mother, where do you keep getting all this? We've sent Felipe back to the Welshport, and you're still getting blood to keep Sebastian healthy and alive. It's been weeks, Mary added. Sebastian needs this to live, Mary. If he doesn't have fresh blood once he wakens, he'll wither away and die. And reviving him and turning him the clock back against the will of God and life will be will all be for naught. I can't let that happen, Eliza explained. Mary looked pensive and wondered why it mattered so much that Sebastian still stay alive, aside from the obvious that their all work would have been for nothing if they just let him die. It all seemed to be put pressure on Eliza. She was all but meticulous to give Sebastian what he needed, now that he was staying with them. What if one day you don't give him this? What happens to us if we let Sebastian go without blood? Mary asked. Eliza stopped stirring. Her eyes welled up with tears, telling Mary that the danger of what she asked happened was real and was true source of Eliza's constant adherence of Sebastian's blood drinking. You don't want to know, Sebastian said at the opening of short hallway in the good cabin that led to his blacked out room where he slept. Gaspar. Yes. Um, you're awake, hey, Eliza said, turning quickly to her undead nephew, quickly changing the subject. Answer my question, mother, said Sterling. You said you don't want to know. I said you don't want to know, Sebastian replied. I want my mother to tell me. What so obviously is holding back Sebastian if he's concerning if it's concerning to her and to you, then I want to know what would happen if Sebastian dies again. Eliza looked over at Sebastian, whose face has turned permanently white as the whitest linen sheet. His dark blue eyes were now an aqua blue. They revealed the ocean in the light of day. He shrugged Eliza as if to give her the option to let Mary in on the truth or not. Eliza sighed deeply and chose to let her in on the secret. My darling, the universe is a give and take. Once we take from a natural event, we must give something as well. When I sent your Aunt Sabrina's spirit to live inside of Charlotte, I had to give something in return, my own freedom. I can't leave Good Island, ever. This island is now home in is my prison. For the reversal of life I gave Sabrina. Nature, the reverse, may take down the score. I cannot break that pact I made for Sabrina's sake, Eliza explained as she paused to Mary to absorb what she had said. And Sebastian, Mary then asked, looking off into the dark corner where Sebastian was in. Eliza faced hardened. Sebastian's case was much more potent, much more serious. Sabrina lived as a spirit inside a host body. There was one body, two souls. But her powerful pull for Mary's fate in asking to bring Sebastian's entire body and soul back from the grave was much more to ask from the universe. Eliza's debt became much larger. When I brought Sebastian back to us, Eliza began to explain. Looking over at her deathly cold nephew, I gave up something altogether, something much more precious to me than my own freedom. What did you give up? Mary asked. And Sebastian lifted a brow, waiting for Eliza to speak what he already knew. You. I gave you, Eliza said softly. What? Mary said, confused. If I die, again, breaking the spell, you die. It's as simple as that. Mary, we are tied together. My soul and yours, just like Charlotte and my mother, but that powerful play here is what I was given my own body, Sebastian said, filling in the blanks. Mary gasped and stepped back towards her chair. She held tightly to her stomach that felt as if he had tangled it in a knot. She sat back in the chair and felt as if her body was tingling. It was the only way, Mary, bringing Sebastian back, was to right your wrong. This is how spells work. The reason Sabrina is only a spirit is because I didn't kill her. I could only bring her halfway back. A full body return requires me to have taken that life in the first place, Eliza explained further as Sebastian poked the pot with his blood and drank from it. Equal exchange! His hips turned crimson. Or sorry, his lips. Yeah, sorry. His lips turned crimson, dark as the blood in the pot that bubbled and felt warm going down his throat. It was like a powerful potion or elixir that seeped into his tissue and brought him energy for the night to come until he returned back to Good Island again before dawn. Raccoon today, he grimaced. I can't believe you'd do that to me, Mary said softly. Mary, my girl, listen to me. There's always a way out of it, and I have a plan. I've already initiated you into a coven with myself, so we have that protection. But there's something else, Eliza said. What is it, Mary wondered. Stop this. You both cannot go on about what you plan to do for each other before you help me. You understand? I have to get my wife back. And since the two of you are practically responsible for what's happened to me, I will remind you that you will have to get me back to where I was. My Uncle Jacob has to be stopped. If not for me, think of Charlotte, Sebastian added. There's nothing we can do for Evie. I've already told you that, Eliza replied. What do you mean? Your powers brought me back from beyond the grave. You can't help me save Evie from the mental institution and reunite with her? Sebastian, listen to yourself, Mary shouted as she stood up again. Mary, Eliza said softly, hoping to calm her daughter. You will never be with Evie again. It's over. That part of your life is over. And as guilty as I am being responsible for what we have to focus on other things. And by that, I mean you're half right. Jacob does need to be dealt with, Mary added. I won't abandon my wife, Sebastian growled as Eliza got between her daughter and her nephew. I'm afraid you have no choice, cousin. Jacob has one on that end, and I don't go gallivanting around the mainland to help you save a lost cause, Mary growled back. Sebastian furrowed his brow and slammed the pot in his hand into the dinner, forcing the remains of blood to splash upward, allowing a rain of red droplets to shower Mary and Eliza's face. Then I'll just skip the next blood breakfast and die. Would that help your situation? If I can't have all Evie, I'll starve myself and wither away, cousin. Mary, you'd be right along with me. How would that make you feel? What magic spell would save you from that? None at all. Isn't that right, Aunt Eliza? Her life would pay back the one she took from me, and we'd both be gone. It's really very simple. A debt to the universe is one hell of a debt, Sebastian said in a threat. We can't give you everything, Sebastian. Your life was enough. But Evie will have to find her own way out. We have all come too far, Eliza added, changing course on helping Sebastian. Mother, I won't go. I won't try to get Evie out of Wincliffe. I won't, Mary said. It's too dangerous. Christian is still searching for me, and the Lords want my head on a platter. The minute they find out I'm snooping around Evie, there's no telling what they'd do to me. Well, it doesn't have to be you, Mary. Then who? Eliza said. Then who? Sebastian asked. This is exactly what I had been talking about. The only way to get Mary out of the pact with my spell would be to benefit with you, too, Sebastian. Mary cannot go into Welshport and not be detected as she is. That's not out of the question. And I certainly cannot leave Good Island. What we need to do is find someone else for Mary. Sebastian looked at Eliza like she had three heads. He looked over at his cousin Mary, and she too seemed in the dark to Eliza's plan. Felipe knows, Mary said. No, Eliza replied. Mary, you need a new face, a new body, a new shell to live out the rest of your days, undetected and unknown to the rest of the world. Once we find that person, I will switch you both in spirit and body, and forever you'll live in her face. That way we can carry on in destroying the monster Jacob and help Sebastian, Eliza explained. That sounds so. Mary was at a loss for words. That very idea of switching bodies with someone just to protect herself was all the horrible things she had done seemed diabolical, sinister, even evil. Jacob will have no way of knowing where or who you are, even knowing you're still alive. Mary means you can't leave Good Island. Either your mother is right or we have to switch your bodies with someone. But who? Mary wondered. Sebastian took a minute. Then it came to him, a woman he knows. A woman that not only has access to roam free around Welshport undeclared, but also access to Terramore House, and a Lord family that will open up many doors for getting revenge on Jacob. Georgina, Sebastian said. It should be my grandmother's maid, Georgine Kent. Could that work? Mary wondered happily. It will work because it has to work, Sebastian answered. Mary looked at Eliza. Eliza looked at Sebastian and grinned. It was the perfect disguise. Then let it be done, Eliza said, with a tone voice. All right, guys, that's the read alone. I actually like the fact that they're getting into the equivalency of the John's getting into the equivalency of the magic. What exactly has Eliza had to give up to use all these spells for things to happen? So when she put Sabrina's ghost into Charlotte, a little girl, she had to give up something. So she had to give up leaving Good Island. She can never leave that island again. That's why things are brought to her um, by her daughter and by other people, obviously. Um, Now, also with bringing Sebastian back, it had to be something bigger because she wasn't just bringing the soul back; she was bringing body and soul back. So she had to give up her daughter, but only if Sebastian dies. But she's got a counter plan for that one. So we'll be interesting to see if A, she pulls that off, B, if that obviously B, if that, and really I'm curious to see who is going to get um, Evie out of Wincliffe, or is she going to get herself out? Is the person who's watching her going to get out? Is Christian going to find a way to get out, or is Christian going to be dinner for Sebastian? Ring the dinner bell. Not if Felipe can help it, apparently. Um, could you imagine? Yeah, yeah. I can't let my friend be Emil. No, no. Take anybody but him or me. Really, really good scene setting. I love the new character. We have the familiar characters. We have one new character so far. There's other Georgina, obviously, and Dr. Kim. Curious, and also I sort of forgot Evie's little brother. So he's now in Welshport, and gonna be interesting to see what happens to him or what kind of questions he's gonna ask. We know he's gonna ask about Evie, and what exactly are they gonna tell him? And is he gonna believe their bullshit? We'll find out. We'll find out. Really, really good. Link will be in the description box. Check it out, guys. To Benight and Beguile, written by John Philip Betancourt. Go check it out.